Gibraltar Point to North 4 and westerly 3 to 5, up to southwesterly 4 or 5, occasionally 6 later. Showers for a time, good. North 4 and to South Seville, westerly 2 to 4, up to southwesterly 4 or 5 later. Showers, good. South Seville to Lyonnais, west and northwest 2 to 4, up to southwest 4 or 5 later. Lyonnais to Mountain, including the Harbour Sea, northwest up and west 2 to 5, up and south 5 or 6 later. Showers, low later and west, good occasional, light later and west. This is News Briefing with Charles Carroll, and these are this morning's headlines. 2 hostages have been rescued by Israeli forces during a raid in southern Gaza. The heads of water firms which carry out illegal sewage spills are to be banned from receiving bonuses. Business, a new report shows a promising start to the year for companies across the UK. And in sport, the Kansas City Chiefs have won the Super Bowl. The Israeli military says it rescued 2 hostages during a raid by members of its special forces in Rafah in southern Gaza. Yes, to a hospital in central Israel where doctors say they're in good condition. This led to something like an intense civilian bombardment of the constituency shelter, at least 20 people killed. Earlier, President Biden spoke by phone to Israel's Prime Minister and reiterated that there should be no offensive in Rafah without raids to ensure the safety of civilians. Chief
showers moving their way in from the west and spread eastward through time this morning. The showers, though, will clear away from East Anglia little later on this morning, and with the cloud breaking up as well, there were some sunny spells throughout the afternoon. Temperatures of 8 to 10 Celsius. For northeast England and eastern Scotland, variable cloud this morning with the odd shower, but it is largely dry, and there will be increasing sunny spells. And after a chilly start with a touch of frost, temperatures getting up to 6 to 8 Celsius. For western Scotland, northwest England, and Northern Ireland, there's a risk of wind gusts, especially in Northern Ireland, with temperatures close to freezing. This is the most showery part of the UK today. The showers will continue to be in other parts of west and northwest England, making wind for a time with some slow winds, and limited sun spells to temperatures of 4 to 7 degrees Celsius.
Telegraph and the Express focus on comments on the concept of chaps that awoke extremist about their plans to relax security checks to increase diversity in our forces. Quoting saying it was inconceivable to allow that amid the threat from Russia with the conflict in the Middle East. The lead in the Financial Times this morning is good news for Donald Trump. It says a survey carried out in conjunction with academics in the US found that 42% of Americans felt the former president to be the best steward of the economy, and 31% chose Joe Biden. The main story in The Guardian is a push by thousands of overseas students who were accused of cheating in English language tests 10 years ago to clear their names. Says new evidence raises fresh questions over the Home Office's decision to make a blanket accusation of cheating against 35,000 of them, in a case which says draws parallels with the Post Office Horizon scandal. My New Life is the headline in the Mirror. It's been speaking to Alex Betty, a teenager who was founded by a lorry driver in the French Pyrenees last December, who had spent 6 years on the run with his brother and grandfather. On the eve of his 18th birthday, Alex, who now lives with his grandmother in Oldham, tells the people he doesn't expect to hear from his mother and doesn't want to because he doesn't want her to go to court. He reveals he's started a computer programming course, he's been on a few dates, and already enjoyed some birthday celebrations. Finally, the Sun's front page this morning is a full-page photo of King Charles and Queen Camilla as they walked to church on the Sandringham estate yesterday in the King's first public outing since his cancer diagnosis. King's wave of hope. 5:38, now the business news, and a new report shows companies across most areas of the UK enjoyed a positive start to the year. Joanna D'Souza has the details.
10 out of 12 regions monitored in the latest NatWest Regional PMI survey saw business activity accelerating in January. London posted the strongest growth, followed by the West Midlands. Business activity fell in the North East, but at the slowest pace since last August, and unemployment either rose more quickly or dropped at a reduced rate in the majority of cases. The survey also showed improved business expectations in most regions, with the West Midlands recording the highest level of confidence.
Fraud is getting more sophisticated. Always stop, think, and check.
A new TV advertisement with a simple message. If something appears too good to be true, that's undoubtedly the case. Fraud is the most common crime in the UK. Until now, the police, banks, and technology firms have all had their own strategies to work with the dangers, but the government says it's bringing them together to provide consistent anti-fraud advice on a website designed to be a one-stop shop for information. It aims to reduce levels of the crime by 10% by the end of next year, though critics say it's too weak to take on the scams effectively. With the Olympics in Paris approaching, Team GB and Paralympics GB have signed a sponsorship deal trading at $1.26 against the euro sterling is at €1.17. That makes it now worth 85.4 pence.
Sports news and the details of an exciting Super Bowl and the rest of this attention is Paris.
Good morning. Kansas City Chiefs have retained their Super Bowl title with an overtime win against San Francisco 49ers in Las Vegas. With 3 seconds to go in the extra period, Patrick Mahomes threw a touchdown pass to Nicole Hartman to seal a 25-22 victory. They're the first back-to-back winners since the New England Patriots 19 years ago. In the Premier League, Arsenal thrashed West Ham level on points with second-place Manchester City. Bukayo Saka scored twice in a 6-0 win, while Rasmus Højlund scored for the 5th game in a row as Manchester United won 2-1 at Aston Villa, where Stockton McTominay got the winner's 4 minutes time. Subsequent after Borough through to the quarter-finals of the Scottish Cup, Alders Celtic won 2-0 at St Mirren, and goals from Henry Furuhashi, Jason Maida, while Lawrence Shankman scored 2 as Hearts won 4-1 at Everton. In England, the holders Chelsea are through to the quarter-finals of the Women's FA Cup. Myra Ramirez scored the only goal of the game as they beat Crystal Palace. There are also wins for Manchester City, Manchester United, Liverpool, Everton and Brighton. And in the Six Nations Championship, Ireland made it 2 wins out of 2 by thrashing Italy in Dublin. Dan Sheehan scored 2 of their 6 tries. The reigning champions won 36-0.
Campbell interviews briefing with the Packers and Strong's first years. In 2002, Slobodan Milosevic, the president of Serbia and Yugoslavia, went on trial at a Hague International Criminal Tribunal for bullying, crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity during the wars. A spokesman for the tribunal, Jim Mankin, set out the task of facing responsibility.
They are charging him with genocide in Bosnia. That is the most difficult crime to prove because it is the most serious crime that we have a mandate for. They will have to prove his command responsibility for the mass murder, deportation, ethnic cleansing of non-Serbs in Croatia, in Bosnia, and in Kosovo.
President Clinton was acquitted of his impeachment trial in Spain in 1999. In 1994, a version of one of the world's most famous paintings, The Scream, by Edvard Munch, was stolen from the Norwegian National Gallery. And in 1554, Lady Jane Grey was beheaded at the Tower of London. Story will end this morning's edition of Newsbreak. It's just 5:43. And the breath of the day with Eleanor James, Associate for Brits and Pigs, Kensington Square.
Good morning. This year, my church is celebrating 150 years since the first worship service took place in our building. We will have a year of activities with all sorts of events happening. We'll also be telling stories of those who have been part of St Paul's over the years. It will be wonderful to celebrate with our church family and the local community. I'm personally looking forward to being reminded to celebrate this year when there are many difficult and challenging things going on in our world at this time. Celebration is an important part of life. It helps us to focus on the positives and be reminded of all that has happened. The people of Israel were encouraged to remember and to celebrate events in their history, not to look back and wish they were there again, but to be ever mindful of where they had come from and where God had been at work in their lives. And this is my hope and prayer for our own celebrations, that we will be reminded in a similar way of our story and all that is good which has happened. If you drive, you will know the importance of looking in the rear-view mirror to help you gain a perspective of where you are now as you look through the much larger windscreen and move forward. There is so much going on at this time that we can forget to look back, to be thankful and to celebrate. Let's not forget to do so. Dear God, in this fast-paced life, give me courage to look back, to reflect and celebrate as I move forward.
This is BBC Radio 4 at 6. Time now for Farming Today with Charlotte Smith.
Hello. Today, BNG, Park the Wildlife Trust say not enough. We'll explain later. Let's start though in the Ashdown Forest, where a rescue plan for nature is being drawn up. The project could see rare plants and animals, including nightingales, turtle doves, pine martens and beavers, being restored to the landscape. The plan hopes to win funding from the government as part of its landscape recovery programme. BBC South East Environment correspondent Yvette Austin reports.
The hardy Exmoor ponies of Ashdown Forest are just here to show they've got a job to do, to graze on invasive gorse that smothers other more important plants on the heathland. Mark Infield is land recovery manager for the Ashdown Forest.
What they're able to do is, this is heather, and one of the most important species for which Ashdown Forest is known, the heathland, and they do that by getting rid of some of this grass that will suppress it, the gorse that will suppress it, and they help us keep the heathland in good condition.
Nightjars, glowworms, that aren't on this side of the beach, but they can't migrate because it's not a corridor, because they need a corridor to sort of connect. And so only by joining, all of us joining together and actually following one plan, can we allow nature to recover.
From improving wetlands in the valleys where the introduction of beavers might help prevent flooding, to the woodlands where introducing pine martens might precede the return of the red squirrel, the plan is complex, but Mark Infield thinks achievable.
So what we want to do is to work in partnership with the owners and managers of those lands that surround us, so that we can work together to have nature spread out across the landscape in a way that it just can't at the moment.
One key aim is to help the threatened nightingale and turtle dove by providing nesting areas impenetrable to predators, thickets of thorn, bramble and wild rose. Nick Atwell again.
What I'd love to see is to reverse the decline in species. I'm lucky enough to become a grandfather at the weekend, and my granddaughter Molly, I really worry about what world she's going to inhabit in 70 years' time. And I would love to be able to play my part in encouraging nature back, to allow her to live in the same sort of world with all the species that perhaps we took for granted when we were young, that she could also experience the joy of nightingales and skylarks and all these other wonderful creatures.
Nick Atwell. Farming is going through a tough time. Prices, the supermarkets, massive changes in public subsidy systems, endless rain, or drought. The word many use a lot is challenging, at least when they're not using ruder words. This week, we're going to look at the challenge of running a farming business. Because while it can look like a lovely lifestyle, farms are fundamentally businesses. We'll talk about red tape, paperwork and diversification. But let's start with an overview from Martin Hansen, Head of Agriculture at HSBC UK.
It's always challenging for any farm because there's always a greater level of uncertainty in farming than there are in most businesses. There's the usual things about uncertainty around the weather, about animal health, volatility in input prices. We've also got volatility on commodity prices as well. But then in the last couple of years, there's also the issues around uncertainty around how the governments of the UK will deal post-Brexit with the industry, and how the industry is moving towards production in more sustainable ways. And all of that uncertainty is an extra thing for farmers to think about.
Do you think it is significantly different than running a different business if you were in the business, I don't know, making widgets or something? Is farming so different?
I think there are some differences and complexities to farming. I think time scale is the main one. It can be cyclical farming. There are always good years and bad years in farming, and so the business tends to be run with more of a long-term view. And I think part of that is also regarding the way that farming businesses are made up. Quite often they're family concerns, and succession planning for a farming business is quite often around passing it on to the next generation, whereas with other businesses banks deal with, succession might be around building the business up to be very profitable so it can be sold on. So there are differences to the way we work with farms compared to other businesses.
At the moment, we're seeing this massive transition from the system of farmers being given subsidy and a direct payment under the EU system to different systems across the UK. England is the furthest ahead, and it's phasing out those direct payments. Is that making a massive difference to farm incomes and running those businesses?
I think it's starting to be felt by farms. When the scaling down first happened, it came off the back of some good periods for farming in terms of commodity prices, and therefore sort of the pain wasn't really felt straight away. Now we're in a period where perhaps profitability on farming is back down to more normal levels, and so that reduced income is beginning to be felt. What I would say though is that quite early on a lot of farms started to think about this and began to diversify, and as they've spread their risk and their income streams, that's certainly helped. And I think more recently in England we've got more knowledge about what those government replacement schemes look like, and so there's been a movement in that direction to look at the new income streams that might be available.
How important to a farm business is diversification already, and indeed going to be?
Well, if I look at the lending book that HSBC's got in the UK, is a lot of our most successful farming customers have diversified, and that might be diversification out of agriculture and other income streams, and certainly energy generation has been a very good one for many farmers, or it may just be that they're spreading the risk inside of agriculture and diversifying into other methods of farming. And certainly the move towards regenerative techniques has played a part in that, and we're seeing many more arable farms starting to have livestock, and that diversification helps when prices change in different subsections of agriculture.
Martin Hanson from HSBC. Today is BNG Day. Biodiversity net gain becomes the law in England. It means that any developer building 10 or more homes must not just replace the biodiversity they've destroyed, they have to show a 10% net gain over what was there before. Smaller developments will be covered from April. Well, the net gain can be on the housing estate, or builders can buy a biodiversity unit from a landowner, and if that's not possible, they can get a more expensive biodiversity credit from the government, which will then invest in habitat projects across the nation. Wherever it is, the land must be managed for nature for 30 years. But the Wildlife Trusts say the BNG ambition is too low, and there should be a 20% net gain for nature. Sue Young is head of land use planning.
Well, 10% is not enough of a contribution for nature recovery in the current crisis, but also habitat creation is very difficult and unpredictable and takes time, and so 10% may simply be a contingency that ensures that overall no nature is lost. And we're really worried that some of the rules that the government has now set are going to constrain the ability of those developers who want to be ambitious and those planning authorities who want to be ambitious to do what the legislation says and regard 10% as a minimum and not as a ceiling.
We also have a housing crisis. In England, we are missing our house building targets year after year after year. And this surely puts more pressure on at 10%. At 20%, it would put even more pressure on.
Absolutely, we think that it's important to solve the housing crisis at the same time as we solve the nature crisis. So we think sustainable development is really important, and we believe that you can do both at the same time. It's really important for development to avoid harming nature in the first place. So the best place to put development is where there isn't any nature to begin with. And if we could avoid that impact, then that will be much better for developers. But if they can't, then biodiversity net gain is a way to address the harm that they're doing and put something back for the future and leave a positive legacy for the future.